Welcome back to Altenberg in Germany for the BMW IBSF Bobsleigh and Skeleton World Championships presented by Idealversicherung. It's the second heat of 4 of the women's skeleton competition. Life in the freezer continues. -20 this morning, or yesterday morning, -11 this morning. The snow is coming down. Martin Haven and Bree Schaff trying to piece together the story here after Bree, a crazy first heat.
It certainly was. The top 3 overall in the world are not anywhere near the top 3 here today, with Hannah Neise, a junior world champion, right up in the mix. In second place, Jacqueline Lölling of Germany, overtaking her favored teammate, Tina Hermann, with a blazing first run, nailing her steers all the way down the track. And of course, Elena Nikitina from Russia had the start and had a solid drive really coming together for her here in Altenberg.
So Elena Nikitina, our first heat leader, 700ths of a second ahead of Jacqueline Lölling. Hannah Neise, the wild card junior world champion, always gets an entry into the senior worlds, and she has used that well. Katie Uhlaender in 4th place, went off early. Good solid run from Katie, and a tie for 5th between the last 2 sliders to go. Elena Tararychenkova from the Bobsleigh Federation of Russia and Germany's Sophia Griebel. But as you say, World Cup champion Janine Flock down in 17th, ahead of Liz Maier. Laura Deas, the Olympic bronze medalist, World Cup champion in 17th. 2nd and 3rd in the World Cup are 11th and 12th after the first heat. So is this a freak? Are they going to tidy their act up? Or have they already given away too much time? Will they ever be able to make that up? I think it kind of requires everybody else to have a crazy second day. There's Hannah Neise. What a golden opportunity she has made. Coach Dirk Matchens there. Yeah, so go on. You know what to do, get on and do it. I'm not sure that's particularly going to help Yulia Kanakina. But Bree, I mean, a little bit of snow, but the snow wasn't the issue, was it? It's the temperature, the hardness of the ice. There's very little grip. It's like sliding on a marble floor, so everybody is just scrabbling a little bit.
Exactly. When you have the last 2 athletes tie for 5th, we know that we've got some great consistent ice conditions here despite the snow.
Well, here's our start list. Laura Deas, 20th, goes off first, and then India Tarada and so on. They follow on all the way down to Elena Nikitina. In heats 2, which is now, and 3, all our athletes go. It only gets cut to a field of 20 for heat 4. So for Nicole Silveira, Agathe Basar, Brogan Crowley and Sarah Roderick, they need a great second run to have a comfortable night in the top 20. Getting the second heat of the BMW IBSF Women's Skeleton World Championships underway. Olympic silver medalist from Pyeongchang 2018, Laura Deas for Great Britain, lying in 20th place after the first heat from a 6th fastest start.
Laura ran a minute flat in the first heat, so now kicking things off here in the second heat, we'll get a good idea of what the ice is doing. A bit of an oversteer there going into 4, a great exit. But like we talk about, did she work too hard to get there?
Or has she adjusted her runners? You can't change the runners, but you can adjust them. Has she got more control now?
I would imagine there was a lot of adjustments going on, Martin, especially given, high on the exit of Kreisel, taking that usual tap there. I was saying it, I imagine a lot of athletes made some adjustments, given it is a bit warmer today than it has been all week, but everyone has been calling this ice absolutely bulletproof.
Yeah. A tiny rub against the wall, but not the big shoulder hit that she had in the first heat. 59.45, so 55 hundredths of a second better. And it looked it as well. It was less of a 1,500-meter crash against the ice, basically. It looked like she had more control. And, you know, this is the open question, isn't it? And it's always the balance between having a sled that's got the tiniest contact patch on this cold ice for maximum speed and having a little bit more control of that speed.
Yes, too much control and you're just cutting a lot of ice and slowing yourself down. You want to be just riding that fine edge of out of control, because we see a lot of fast runs that don't look that great in skeleton. But that was a much better heat. Laura's going to be playing that game now of trying to climb out of that pit just for her own personal satisfaction.
Second to go in the second heat, and Elena Tararychenkova of Latvia. And this young slider has only competed this year for the first time in the World Cup. This is her first ever World Championships. So her debut put her in 19th place, 591, same start as in the first heat.
Dia looking to gain experience. And coming from the Sigulda track, I would imagine the Altenberg track is not that big of a deal for her. Sigulda, of course, known as being one of the treacherous tracks in the world.
I think you're right. I think anybody coming from Sigulda to here feels quite a similar rhythm, even though it's a very different kind of track still. Snow looking like it might be more of a factor.
Massive pressures that hit you all at once.
And then Dia 60, 5300s back. So this is going to be a similar run to her first heat. It looks fairly similar, actually. She's not wildly out of control. And across the line, 59.85. She had a 59.98 in the first heat. So somewhere like a sort of moderate day at Innsbruck, that would be a significant improvement. But Laura Deas with more than half a second on her in the first heat. They were only a couple of hundreds apart, so she drops 3800s behind. Now the question is whether she stays in the top 20 overnight or not.
And Laura Deas has a chance to stay in that winner's box for a while here. However, we do have Janine Flock coming up shortly.
As the day continues and it continues to snow, staying away from the walls is going to be very, very important because there is a lot of snow out there. Third slider is Canada's Elizabeth Maier. Joe Cecchini wearing his Italian gear, but because the Canadians don't have coaches here on tour, he is helping out. They've had a little bit of help as well from Jeff Payne, who's here coaching for the Czech Republic, and of course, a former Canadian slider himself. So Liz Maier. Benny will be sliding in the four-man competition. Had crash in the two-man, had crashes in training as well. There were a lot of crashes in training yesterday in monobob and in the four-man. And a little longer hold at the start because they are sweeping to keep the snow out of the way. So Laura Deas will probably increasingly be wrapped up if she's spending much more time there. We're saying it's a little warmer today, only because it was -21 yesterday morning when the sleds arrived at the track, -11 this morning. So, yeah, warmer, but not exactly what you'd call moderately warm. And the ice temperature, the refrigeration plant will barely be on tick over, to be honest, in these conditions. So next up, Liz Maier then. 7th best start, but it all went away from corner 4 on. Ended up in 18th place at the bottom.
.556 start for Liz. I understand that the Canadians have really just been trying to make the most of it this season, an abbreviated season for them. Oh, skidding out of corner 4. She took that hit. Now the question is, was that skid worse than taking that wall straight on? And how much time did that kill for Liz? A little drop off the end of 9 is not bad, as long as you can relax into the sled and find your line. She did skid through that straightaway a bit, and again, hitting out of Kreisel is going to cost her.
She was 1300s ahead of Laura Deas. She's 1400s back. The gap grows to nearly 2 tenths, so she's lost about 3 tenths of a second already. 3500s off to the British slider and across the line, 59.91. She came down 59.77 in the first heat, so it actually didn't look as quite as untidy, but it actually didn't have as much pace. The snow is a little heavier, little thicker flakes, larger flakes coming down, so that may affect it more. It snowed fairly consistently in the first heat, but yeah, that corner 4 is so key to this track.
Yeah, and Liz just looked like she had trouble finding her usual comfort on the sled and on the track. And again, I think a lot of that comes down to when you're not able to consistently race through a season. All of this is a big buildup into World Championships.
Again, the timing, little late,
Chin
a
just
little
a
early
bit
coming
up
down.
there, yep.
Yeah. Early off Tudai, and the pressure was still there, pushed her back up on the exit. So our World Cup points winner, Janine Flock, took her third Crystal Globe. Never off the podium this season in the regular season. This was not a good time to have a 17th best run.
Yeah, this is not the normal place that you would see the Golden Bib racing in World Championships. However, she will be taking that overall title into next season, Olympic season, which is a huge boost. It would just be unfortunate for her to finish off this season so low on the rankings at World Championships.
5:72, same start as in the first heat. Ooh, and again, big waves in the Kreisel, came in on the wrong side, and again, she gets spat out.
She's finding the lead a little bit better than the first heat, but we're just not seeing that usual form out of Janine right now.
Yeah, skid there into 15, won't have helped the speed either, so 4,600s ahead of Laura Deas. 59.27, again, that's half a second quicker than she went in the first heat. She had a 72, so 4,500s quicker, but that's a big improvement. So 59.27 in the first heat would have moved her up in, well, 2 or 3 places. So it's still not a world-beating run, I'm afraid.
No, but she did find a lot of time. Her exit of 4 and her exit of Kreisel weren't great, but they were better than the first run, and you can see how much more time that found her.
She was 1.4 seconds back after the first heat. And that means that she's got to be half a second better than everyone for the remaining 3 heats, doesn't it? If she's going to get to the top of the pile, and that's a tough ask. Next up, Alessia Crippa, the 20-year-old from Italy. Alessia in her second world. She raced here to 22nd place last year. Let's see what she can produce in this second heat. Well, that's interesting. 5.65 in the
already
first
taking
heat.
it.
Yeah, 900 slower though.
And not only slower, Martin, but we saw her drifting a bit at the top. She has been off pace from corner 1. Once you start taking hits there and you get offline, especially if you don't have the depth of experience as the rest of the field, she seems to have struggled to get it back here.
Was 2,200s ahead of Janine. Whoa. Huge waves in the Kreisel. Gathers it up, but gets dumped on the end.
Out of there.
Wow.
Found her way back onto her runners. That is a great save.
Was that luck or judgment? From 2/10 up to 4/10 back, she'll be at the tail of the field after this. And this is like the surfer who gets caught in the rip and just gets dumped. 60.39 slide. And that is tough for Alessia Crippa, 4/10 slower than her first heat.
Martin, luck, judgment, or a low center of gravity. That's the beauty of skeleton, it's a bit more natural to find your way back onto that sled, especially compared to luge.
Yeah, that would not have been pretty on a luge sled. Wasn't pretty here, was it? Huge and late height is the drama here, Brie.
Yes, and you see that the front of her sled, the nose of that sled, pointing up and down as opposed to staying parallel, and that's how we know that she's lost a bit of control in that corner.
That must just be petrifying.
All runners off the ice. I've been there, Martin. I've done it, and it happens so fast that you move on to the next corner. It's petrifying after, as you start to have flashbacks and recall those moments.
Yeah, will she sleep well? Janine Flock leads from Laura Deas and Liz Maier. 5 down, 21 to go, 19 to go. My maths not being what it ought to be. Next to the line, 21st of our 24 starters in the Women's World Championship, the USA's Kendall Wesenberg. Great tray on the sled. Haven't seen that before. Is that new, or have we just not seen it before? The US with their brand new quick skin suits for the last couple of weeks. As you can see, very different from last year's kit. 2600 to advantage over the current leader, and that is Janine Flock of Austria. That's from the first of the 4 heats. So 15th place after the first heat, 1.1 seconds away from the front of the race. The voice you hear yelling her off is Coach Matt Antoine, raced here in the 2008 Worlds for the USA. Knows the track well after his decade of sliding here. 5.94 again, a little slower than her first start.
Martin, it looks like the groove is spitting athletes a little bit late into corner 1. I think that's why we saw the young Italian slider have some issues there. Oh, big hit out of 4. Kendall Wesenberg might have changed up her equipment here, trying to find some time in the second heat. Struggling to keep that height out of corner 9. You see the sled drop off. Good composure through Kreisel.
Her best speed, she's limiting the damage. Started 400s up on Janine Flock. 900s is out to 1900s, so she's going to drop a space. Laura Deas in second is 4600s back. Kendall should be ahead of her, is ahead of her by a tenth. So Janine stays in the leader's box, but Kendall Wesenberg slips a spot. I was going to say should be no worse than 16th overnight, but there are 4 to go after the top 20, so that's not quite guaranteed, but it ought to be. But you can see the difference that the lack of speed at the bottom makes. She doesn't even get to the finish area.
Martin, my first run down in Altenberg, I barely made it past the finish line. It was rough. Yeah, just a bit of a struggle here with control for Kendall. She's so talented, real natural on the sled, but Altenberg is a track that it's not necessarily about rhythm, it's about survival.
You can see there is more and more snow in the track. That is going to be a feature. So next up for Great Britain, Ashley Pittaway, the Youth Olympic Games champion in women's or girls skeleton in 2016. 5.76 getaway, that's 300 slower than her first heat, so right in the same frame.
It's certainly been fun to watch Pittaway's progress, especially now as the youth programs increase around the world, and we're seeing more and more athletes coming up from a very young age. We'll see many of those in the men's race later today.
Yeah, we first met Ashley. She was so young, she actually had to have a chaperone on tour with her, as well as the coaches. Just 15 when she made her World Cup debut on her home track in Koenigsegg. She's been a real find for the German TV channels as well, because her German is so fluent, although slightly Bavarian. Obviously, they can get somebody in who speaks well, who's not actually German, to give a bit more of an international view. And that was a good run from Ashley, 59.12. What did she do in the first heat? 59.12. And again, it looked like she had decent control most of the run, Bree.
Decent control, and the fact that she still beat Janine Flock, who had a much better second run, says that that was a good run. The track might be slowing down a bit here. The snow has been increasing, as evidenced by the new snow protocol for the second heat here.
Well, she's got that long, lean form, which is so good for skeleton. Narrow shoulders, long legs, gives you a good sort of seesaw balance on those tiny little contact patches.
Yes, she's a taller athlete. And the cool thing about skeleton is when you look at the top three, the athletes vary so much. So it's really about finding your way down the track.
It is a real feel sport, isn't it? There is no body shape that is the skeleton body shape, as you absolutely correctly point out. Next up for Belgium, Kim Meylemans, 8th fastest starter, 13th at the bottom of the track for Kim. Wasn't a great first heat in her 6th World Championships.
Kim's helmet provides one of the coolest shots there down the start ramp. I love it. You can see the lights overhead reflected.
Yeah, her and the chrome on Janine Flock's helmet, you see everything reflected. Ooh, little skid, but not a bad exit from 4 to 5. She's in the green over Ashley Pittaway.
Yeah, we saw her lean away from that hit, and sometimes it's better to take it because when you lean, you put the sled into a skid. She'll be drifting nicely early into Kreisel here.
Good speed and a pretty decent exit. The two of them were tied at the end of the first heat. The gap's coming down, 1700s. Pittaway had good speed. See the knee steers going in from Kim Meylemans. Going to be close at the line. She should
those
just
early
about
entries.
Yeah, just ahead, 58.97. So she opens up 1500s on Ashley Pittaway. They were tied after the first heat. They weren't the only tie either. We had a couple of ties in the field. And some other very tiny margins, considering how wide the top 20 was spread by 1.68 seconds. Considering how wide that was, some of the gaps between the athletes were tiny.
That was a great shot. If you see, her head was down, she wasn't looking, but you could see her just leaning away from that anticipation of a hit, which is a dangerous thing to do, but it's a hard habit to break when you're anticipating tagging a wall.
And especially for the brain, when the head is out front, it gets very panicky about everything coming towards it unprotected. Well, we've gone from one Kim to the other one, from Kim Meylemans to Kimberley Bos. So Kimberley Bos having a stunning season this year with only 2 races that she completed not on the podium. 3 silver medals, 2 bronze medals, and for the first time in a couple of years, actually healthy and fit, and it made such a difference. And as you pointed out in the first heat, sled builder and coach Kristen Bromley coaching remotely from home in the UK. Good morning to Kristen, to Shelley and the kids. They'll be homeschooling right after this and after the men's race. So sometime this afternoon. Joske Leconte there with the sled. She's got the experience of all these competitions for the Netherlands. So, yeah, anything that Kim comes across, Joske's been there, done that. And between the two of them, I think they've produced a really good pairing in terms of just getting on with this season. And the smile is back on her face. Last year it was a grimace of pain almost all the time. Kimberley Bos really enjoying her year.
Yeah, and I think the boss knows, too, that she needs to enjoy herself while she's sliding. You can't be forcing, you know, anger, all these other emotions out of, it's all reflected on the sled. And so this should be, hopefully a bit of a better run for Kim. Late into 5, that is unusual. That means she steered very hard on that second pressure.
But straight down the middle, and we've seen that from our German men last year. That's exactly how they were coming off 5, but a horrible run down into the Kreisel.
Big skid there. She's gonna need to get this back under control. But like you were saying, Martin, she's done a great job this season of really dialing in her team in a season that has so many variables.
Yeah, bronze, Crystal Globe, 3rd in the World Cup standings, behind Janine Flock and Tina Hermann. And across the line, drops a couple of places, 6,300s back. 59.62, she came down 59.10 in the first heat. And that's not snow, that is just the vagaries of this sport. It is It's all about the body, isn't it? The athlete is 75, 85% of the all-up weight of the sliding equipment. And, you know, it makes a huge difference. If your body just makes the right moves, you get all the right slides.
Indeed, you are a part of your sled and you are trying to manipulate your equipment, but find the right, just the perfect setup for your sliding style, for your body type on the right day with the weather. Martin, there's so many variables involved in skeleton. It can be maddening, but we just saw Kimberley Bos lose. I mean, unfortunately, 6/10 back. It's not just dropping 2 spots, but that's a big chunk of time to try and make up tomorrow.
Well, talk about making up time. 6400ths off the lead is our world champion, Tina Hermann. She took the silver crystal globe again. 1 win, a silver and 2 bronzes. It was a very up and down season. Didn't drop out of the top 10. She's only been out of the top 10 twice in her life. And she has only once in 6 previous world championships been out of the top 2. That was on her debut. So for Hermann to come here and be out of the top 10 even in the first heat is hitherto unexperienced territory.
This is already a much better run than her first run. This is true Herminator form right here, and I have a feeling she has the ability, like no one else, to sneak up into potentially a top 6 here from being this far back.
Well, she knows how to find speed, and she has a very determined mindset. Top speed from Tina Hermann, half a second up, 0.8 of a second up. Now, don't forget, this is over Kim Meylemans, not over the fastest slider, but if she can produce a great run like that, 58.02, that is 0.3 quicker than anybody has been down the track today. That is what she needed to get her back into contention. Unbelievable.
Great run there for Tina. That was nearly a second faster than her first run. That is a dialed-in track. That's an athlete that knows what she's doing here.
Well, that sets the new benchmark, and look at the difference. She just goes by Kim Meylemans in the Kreisel from a full length back to a full length in front, like she stood still.
That was incredible. I have not seen that before. When you watch that layover, typically you don't see someone gain that much time in 1 quarter. What a camera shot there.
Never, ever seen anybody gain that much. That's ridiculous. So now the new benchmark has been set for everybody else, and we are going to see Tina Hermann hanging around in the leader's box, you would think, for a long while. Valentina Margaglio, 10th place. If she can hang on in 10th place in the overnight standings, that will be a pretty decent result. She finished in 17th here last February. And another big start, 5:37. She's quicker again. Tina, for comparison, started 5:75. So that's 0.38 faster just in the start. And look at her head, Bree, the way her head is always canted over to the side in almost every turn.
Yeah, she does a bit of steering with her head. And Martin, that deficit, we always say in sliding sports, that the more time you can find on the start, typically that multiplies by 3 down a track, especially a long track like this. So that gives her a cushion, but we're watching her bleed it away already in the red.
Only the 7th best speed out of 11 sleds on the track. 8th best speed is going away. So Kim Meylemans 1.1 seconds back. Valentina should be second at the line. She is, but only by a 10th. So Tina Hermann leads 59.08. So that is actually slower by 0.12 of a second than her first run. And it did look less tidy. It didn't look as much like a top 10 run as in the first heat. So again, maybe
it did, and
she didn't make adjustments for the weather, or maybe she did and went the wrong way.
Or on a track like this, Martin, it's easy to start getting in your own head. If you start to question if you're feeling those pressures right there in Kreisel, and she does look a bit uncertain with her steers, and then that can compound, especially now as she sits on this run overnight.
Well, Tina Hermann leads from Valentina Margaglio with the first of our 10 sleds, first 10 of our sleds down. And we now get into the remaining top 10 and then the final 4 sleds. So 9th place after the first heat for Anna Fernstädt, and she was 600ths ahead of Tina Hermann. To maintain that, she needs to get down to a 57.98. Can she do that? The track record is a 57.77 set by Tina Hermann in last year's World Championships, which Tina won. And I don't know, I don't have any records for who has come from the furthest back to win a World Championship gold medal. But 11th after the first heat, if Tina Hermann can somehow claim gold, then she will be more than worthy of being the first woman ever to take 4 World Championship gold medals in skeleton. However, that is a day away, potentially. For Anna Fernstädt, she needs a nice, good start. 5.98 in the first heat, her start. 23rd of our 24 athletes. So this bit, the longest, flattest start in the world, is the toughest bit for her. And from here on in, she has to make up ground.
But the amount of experience that Anna brings to this track and to this race does give her a shot at gaining some spots here. I don't know if it'll be enough to take over the lead, but she can do some climbing. Given her first run was not true to her normal form.
Well, 4/10 behind Tina Hermann, but she started 6:01, so that's 2,600 slower than Tina to start with. Look at the speed on the left, but second best speed into the Kreisel. Good clean exit as well, Bree. She could be moving up here.
Ooh, a bit of a skid there heading into 13-14.
Still second best speed for Anna Fernstädt. She's going to be behind Tina Hermann. Does she drop behind Valentina Margaglio? No, 8100ths back. So 58.89, 100th quicker than her first heat. Which means that either they were both quite random, but in different places, or it was pretty much a carbon copy. She actually started slower by 300ths, so to come back 100th faster, just a bit of an improvement, but nothing like the improvement that Tina Hermann produced.
Yeah, the start deficit was difficult, and it's always tough when you have a run like this, that there's no glaring errors, just little skids here and there, and potentially it's an equipment setup issue or steering too hard to get on that right line.
She looks relatively happy with that. To be in the top 10 after a wild first race run is not too bad. Well, next up for the Bobsleigh Federation of Russia, the first of 3 athletes that they have in the top 8. Just for a moment, a little earlier on, it looked like, oh, we might be talking about a BFR clean sweep of the podium. I don't think that's likely now. Yulia Kanakina, though, 8th fastest off the 3rd best start of 5.48 in the first heat, 5.49 in the second.
We had a great shot of her in the warm-up working through some frustrations with her coach Dirk. A hit out of 4 there, that's not going to help. Her first run was cleaner in that spot.
Yeah. It was below the Kreisel, it all sort of went away. Another good exit of 9, Chudai curve, 1100ths up. She was 4/10 ahead of Tina Hermann, and the speed isn't there.
No, she lost a lot of time up top there.
So how far does she fall from 40 up to nearly 8/10 back? Is she going to lose a second to Hermann? She drops 5 places.
She had a big skid there going into 15, 16, 17.
Yeah. And that is kind of Yulia's story. Getting 2 runs on the same day that match each other is, it just seems that's the holy grail. You know, she was in the medals once in Sigulda, but it's just been so tough for her to find consistent pace. And that mistake in 4, that just wipes out any speed you have at the start.
It's tough to tell from this perspective, but it is quite flat up there for that labyrinth. So the mistake out of 4, you don't have a chance to earn it back again until you're coming out of 9.
coming out of 9 sideways, doesn't earn anything. Next up then for Canada, the first slider that opened our World Championships. Her 5th Worlds, Jane Channell, the 31-year-old from North Vancouver. Team silver medalist last year. 8th place in the women's race. Best World Championships results. 4th place in Winterberg, 5:49. That's 400s quicker than her first heat, so she'll be really pushing hard now. I think she senses there might be a medal chance if she has a good second heat.
Yeah, it's great to see Jane in this position, and obviously tough to tell from the first heat when she was the first athlete off the hill. And that's a nerve-wracking start number when you're waiting, not sure if there's going to be a snow delay, but she handled that very well. And of course, it wasn't until later that we got to realize how good that first run was.
Yeah. Bit of a pinball down the straight and a little late out of the Kreisel, still in the green. Now it drops into the red behind Tina Hermann, but that's only to be expected. Tina so much faster in the second heat. Can Jane consolidate this? If she only loses, well, I was going to say a couple of tenths, but she's already 4 tenths back. And across the line, 84 hundredths back. And Tina Hermann's just kind of standing there almost bashful in the leader's box going, how can nobody be doing this? You know, she made big mistakes in the first heat, but everybody is still making them, and Tina seems to have ruthlessly eradicated them.
Tina but off a monster lead here in the second heat, but Jane just struggled here and there, little bit of skidding, tap on the wall. All of those mistakes add up.
Well, they were a tenth different in the first heat, Bree, but Tina's gone 8 tenths quicker. In fact, she's not. She's gone 94 hundredths quicker than Jane in this one heat. I mean, Tina's
Jane didn't have a bad run.
No, Tina's 2 runs are astonishingly different. So much so that you wonder, was it the evil Tina Hermann that had kidnapped the good one and tied her up in a changing room for the first heat? There's a theory. Next up, a tie for 5th. From I know. I've had more sleep than you, but it doesn't show. Tied for 5th, Sophia Griebel and Elena Tararychenkova, sort of on almost opposite ends of the experience scale. And they were the final 2 sliders in the field. Sophia's only here because Hannah Neise got the 4th German sled and didn't take up a 3rd spot as the junior world champion. And Elena, well, she's here as our 3rd BFR slider. And where early on in the run, I thought maybe Yulia Kanakina, who was then ahead of our first heat leader, Elena Nikitina, I thought maybe she might go 1-2. It looked for a moment as though Tararychenkova might have done. And Sophia Griebel, I tell you what, if she could claim a medal here, she's been a little bit like Alexander Gassner was over the years, the sort of forgotten woman of the German program, where we only see her occasionally where one of the others isn't fit or is off doing something else. But she could earn her place in anybody else's team.
A very, very talented slider, and we saw nearly impeccable lines on the first heat. However, now she's starting in a position where she knows her teammate is at the bottom and had an incredible second run.
Interesting.
Ooh, a little bit of a skid there.
Yeah, she came right down the middle out of 4. Worked a bit too hard, and she's in the red already.
And what you see with that skid, Martin, is sometimes when you work that hard and you release that steer too soon, that release in itself is snapping the sled back to neutral and puts you in a skid.
So the gap has gone from 21 hundredths up to 52 hundredths back. She's basically shooting par here, whereas Tina hasn't birdied every hole, she's eagled every hole, 3/4 of a second slower.
Wow.
A 58.92, that's 12 hundredths worse than her first heat, and it didn't look like quite as neat a run as she had in the first heat. And of course, the problem is when you start to drift out wide now compared to the first run, there is snow out there as well. So that's not helping so much. But Sophia Griebel is second with only our top 5 still likely to go quickly.
Not only is it tough to follow a near-perfect first run, but it's also tough to be staring down a teammate in the winner's box. That can be a bit of a psych out, especially because often the most intense competition is between your own teammates, not necessarily internationally.
If you can't beat your teammate, you're never going to win. Tina Hermann leads from Sophia Griebel and Anna Fernstädt. Germany 1-2 and oh no, not 3 anymore. So tied with Sophia Griebel was BFR's Elena Tararychenkova. Now this young athlete, just 20 years old, World Championship debut. She's only started 6 World Cup races in 4 years. That's how much she is the kind of junior team substitute. But what a great first heat she laid down. If she can produce anything approaching that in the second heat, she could be a big revelation.
Beautiful line there, 4-5. Also demonstrates the depth of this program. When you host an Olympics, that does huge things for your ability to recruit and bring new athletes in.
I was just about to say she is pulling away from Tina Hermann, but the gap has come down. It went up to 3100s, 3400s, down to 22. She's got 300s. But don't forget, this could be positioning herself within the federation, looking into the pre-Olympic season next year. If she can produce second best world championship result for BFR, then suddenly it's her and Nikitina, and Kanakina might be on the outside looking in. 58.69, that is a significantly better run. That's 1100s quicker than her first heat, and there aren't many who have done that.
It's a great point, Martin. The race within the race. A lot of this is shuffling and positioning going into the next season. And in a program with this much depth, the big concern now is beating your teammates to go to an Olympics.
Well, already, Elena Frolova, who's been the third Russian on World Cup, has not made it into their World Championship team. So she's already jumped her. And now she's looking to leapfrog Kanakina. Now, she doesn't have the start of a Kanakina, but if you've got a 10th fastest start at 20 and you're finishing in the top half dozen, suddenly I'm looking at you going, all right, let's see what you've got. 4th after the first of our 4 heats in the BMW IBSF Women's Skeleton World Championships in Altenberg in Germany. The bald eagle on the helmet, it could only be the USA's Katie Uhlaender. Former world champion, retired, returned to the sport, 5.63. That's a little faster than her first heat. And Bree Schaff, Katie has got all the experience, all the knowledge, maybe not in the last couple of seasons here, but she knows how to deal with these high-pressure races.
She certainly does. Katie is one of the most tenacious people I have ever met. We started sliding together in, dare I say it, 2003 at a camp in Lake Placid, and Katie does not stop. She's got such a thirst for the sport, and not to mention just her ability to come back from injury after injury.
500s in the lead over Tina Hermann. This is the best run we've seen so far in the second heat, other than Hermann's. She's losing speed at the bottom. This is where Tina just carved out huge chunks of time. So she comes down 58.83. That's actually 2100 slower than her first heat. And did that all come from corner 4, where she came out again in the middle of the track into 5. That still leaves her in second place, but 4700s back on Tina Hermann. And she was 3400s up on Hermann after the first heat.
Katie had one of the most controlled runs on the first heat. And again, we see very little waving. She caught a ton of pressure. And so I wonder, will she come tomorrow with a little bit looser setup to try and gain some speed?
Well, I think right now, you're just picking names out of a hat if you're trying to predict a podium, aren't you? I think Tina's got to be in the hunt, but she could have a shocker tomorrow as well.
Yeah. Spread eagle.
Yeah, bald eagle, spread eagle. Junior world champion Hannah Neise. What a first run she produced. Now, what does that do to your head when you are, making your World Cup debut? Hannah Neise, just 20 years old from Winterberg, hasn't raced here for 2 seasons, has had training time, obviously, but her Bavarian teammate, Tina Hermann, is the race leader. Is Hermann actually going to lead overnight? I think the answer to that is almost certainly yes. But what does it do to Hannah Neise? Top 3 after the first heat, knowing you've got to do that all again, not once, not twice, but 3 times. She's not had a 4-heat race in her career other than simulation or in your head. This is not 2 days of Europa Cup racing. This is the World Championships. This is very different mentally.
And that said, Martin, while Neise is a younger athlete, the German program does a great job of training younger athletes for these moments. They bring junior teams out to the Olympics because the Olympics is such an intense energy. They do everything they can to prepare athletes for moments like this and anticipate a different intensity, more on the line. Ooh, but she's already behind by 200ths.
Yeah, and a hit into corner 5 on the take-on. So that's going to rob her of speed down the straight, trying to keep it straight and get that line she wanted into the Kreisel. Little flop, she's not going to be in the top 3. She's losing speed, losing ground all the way down. 4th best speed, so she's recovering a little at the bottom. This is where Tina found speed as well. Wild out of 17 across the line. 59.34, that's 8/10 slower than her first heat. And that's,
I mean, you know, Uhlaender gains a spot back.
What we've seen in these 2 heats is skeleton encapsulated, isn't it? Being able to produce 2 runs on the same track on the same day that look even close to each other is almost impossible.
And on a track that's been messing with their heads all week. The ice is slightly more
Yes.
forgiving today at -11, but at -20 for training, it has made it so hard for these athletes to dial in their steers.
Yeah, absolutely so. So Hannah Neise drops down the order to 7th place. Sophia Griebel is 4th. Her teammate, Tina Hermann, leads. Fastest 2 sleds to go. Well, if anybody can hold off the charge of Tina Hermann, it has to be Jacqueline Lölling. She doesn't start quickly, nor does Tina. 5.94 to Tina's 5.76. So she'll lose 2/10 of her advantage before she's even lying down. This is the worst start ever for Lölling because it's so long and flat. 5.84, well, she finds a 10th. That's really important. She starts only 900 slower than Tina Hermann, and so much of her first heat advantage stays alive.
Beautiful line there out of corner 4, and this is a testament to the style of athletes that Germany has been known to produce that might not have fast starts, but their experience in luge makes them impeccable on a track, much like Marion Tace, former German athlete that I used to compete with, that always was able to make up a large deficit.
Yeah, and it's so much a way that the Germans slide is they don't start gangbusters, but boy, can they find speed at the bottom. She still leads.
Wow.
2nd best speed. Jacka flops a little off 15 at the line. She has the lead from Tina Hermann by 1/4 of a second, but the race is on. Jacqueline Lölling looking for her 2nd World Championship gold medal. Tina Hermann looking for her 4th. And Lölling keeps her nose in front, but 58.35, that was 1/3 of a second slower on that run than Tina Hermann. So it's Hermann's.
Right, Martin, she'll be looking at these timesheets later and a bit nervous going into the next day because Tina is certainly going to keep knocking away at that time.
Yeah. Well, she has such a relaxed-looking style, so languid, just a gentle left-hand toe steer out of corner 4, like it's no drama. Down here, though, where the speed is high, she gets a little bit of snow, skids down into 15. So still things to tidy up, and that'll be in her head as good news. Our first round leader for the Bobsleigh Federation of Russia, Elena Nikitina, the fastest starter in the field normally. She has the start record in a 5:38, 1200s away from that, but much better than the 43 in her first heat. So Nikitina starts to turn on the afterburners at the start. How much of that can she keep alive? Clatters off 5.
A little bit sloppier than her first run, Martin. Indeed, like you were saying, it's often a better position, just sports psychology-wise, to have things that you want to fix going into the next heat, rather than having a perfect run that you're trying to repeat.
Yeah, that's for sure. Does anyone ever get a perfect run in skeleton? I think you get one that feels like it was good. I think that's as close as you get to the Holy Grail. 3800's up, but trouble, 12th best speed. Jacqueline Lölling and Tina Hermann will be 1-2, or will they? Oh no, Hermann in third, but 2400s covers the top 3, and Tina is in the mix. 58.53, so that was 2100s slower than her first heat, but she is still in the medals, and again, things to tidy up. Out of 11 and 12, she still had a sizable lead, but 13-14 crossover did for her. She lost too much here as well.
And she doesn't have the size to manage those kind of hits, Martin. Yeah, when you are a smaller athlete like this, you don't have room for error. You don't have that momentum carrying you down the track. And so all of those little hits there that were worse than her first run added up, and she wasn't able to keep the speed at the bottom.
Sergei Chudinov, head in hands. But there is your overnight second position. So Jacqueline Lölling, Elena Nikitina, Tina Hermann, top 3 covered by a quarter of a second. Katie Uhlaender leads the peloton with Alina Tararychenkova 400s behind her. And then look at the margins. 1 1/4 seconds cover the top 10. 3.1 cover the top 20. We still have 4 sleds to go in our first heat of the weekend for the Women's Skeleton World Championships. So your overnight leader, Jacqueline Lölling from Winterberg. Elena Nikitina lies in second, Tina Hermann in third. Martin Haven and Bree Schaff watching the final 4 sleds go down in this second of 4 heats, the first day of action for the Women's Skeleton World Championships. Nicole Silveira of Brazil, the nurse from Calgary in Canada, born and bred in Calgary and in Brazil. So let's see what she can produce. She was 17th at the start first time. That's a fraction slower, 5:77. But if she can tidy up a couple of errors, she could put herself into the top 20 overnight.
Nicole is a former bobsled brakeman turned skeleton athlete, so that she can have more control over her sled and her career. And what we saw in the first heat was a bit of chaos in Kreisel, so we're watching for her to get a bit more comfortable in there. She's already got a better entrance than she did. Oh, not bad. That's a big improvement, Martin, over the first heat. Those are the small wins here for the field that's down below 20.
And she's got really good speed as a result. Top 10 speed, 11th fastest there. This could move her up. She was 20th at the line, and she is in 17th place. So she moves ahead of Laura Deas, the Olympic bronze medalist. She moves ahead of Elizabeth Maier. She moves ahead of India Tarauda and Alessia Kripper. Kripper is out of the top 20 overnight. Tarauda on the bubble. Nicole Silveira will be in the top 20 overnight, and that will make her breathe more easily. Finished 24th in last year's race. There you go. Good, great run from her.
That's incredible. Nicole sometimes struggles with her form, and of course, having coached her as the IBSF Emerging Nations coach for a few years, it's hard not to watch, this totally engaged. But it is so great to see her improving run by run and year by year.
It's been a tough season for her, away from home the whole time, on the road here in Europe, learning the tracks. Every day has been a new day at a new track for Frenchwoman Agathe Basar. 6:07 first heat, 24th best start. She came down 100th behind Nicole Silveira in 22nd place after the first of our 4 runs. And if she puts a tidier run together, she could also break back up into the top 20.
Agathe is a very natural slider, and you can watch her form. She just tends to overthink a bit sometimes. Ooh, hit into 5 there in a skid. Bit of discomfort on the sled. You can see that while she's got her shoulders pinned down, her head is still a bit high, and there's space there from her collarbone to the sled, which is a drag aerodynamically.
Speeds are showing well. Now she's losing a little down in these final 3 corners. Getting closer to the top 20, 20th at the line. That's what she needed. A 59.60. That is 49 hundredths, nearly half a second better than her first heat. And she came out of Kreisel with the 5th best speed. So that shows the top half of the track went really well for her. And it kind of got away as she got down from 14 into 15, 16, 17.
Yeah, not only did it go well, but that, I think, is a testament to her form. She's very relaxed on the sled, and that allows you to keep gaining speed. When you picture if an athlete is tight, they're bouncing off of that sled, and that's forces going in the wrong direction. And you can see, even despite the chaos, she does a good job of staying relaxed.
So 24th, the slowest starter in the field. She drives herself into 20th place at the moment with 2 more sleds to go. Behind her was Brogan Crowley of Great Britain, another of our World Championship debutantes, the 26-year-old. Raced here in the Europa Cup in January and the Intercontinental Cup. There was a double race week here for the 2 junior tiers of sliding. And it was her first time on the Altenberg track in 3 seasons. So it's only her 4th year of sliding. She's got very limited knowledge of this track. Starts a little quicker, 5:52, top 5 starter. But of all the tracks, this is one you can't make up as you go along. You need to have knowledge.
Ooh. No, I mean, we saw her confidence increase there at the start. She has a great, really efficient load, but then even just out of corner 3, skidding began, and that caused the discomfort that we're seeing now.
And again, over there into the snow, down the straight, hasn't helped. 23rd speed of the 23 sleds. Finding a little bit more at the bottom, but it's not going to be enough to move her up. So she's losing more time to race.
She's maintaining form really well.
Yeah. Losing more time to the race leader, a 60.2. Well, that's better than her first run, which was 60.27. But she loses 4/10 to Agathe Basar. If she'd been able to stick with Basar, then she would have found herself in the top 20. But she is 23rd at the moment. So 1 final sled to go in this first day's women's skeleton action. Men will be competing shortly as well on this snowy track.
And Brogan was just cranking her steers all the way down the track. We saw that through her oscillations in Kreisel, and of course taking that hit from 4 to 5.
Well, disappointing first day for Brogan Crowley. She's in the World Championships for her first ever time. And so too, Sarah Roderick from the USA. A late season World Cup debutante. Hadn't seen her in the World Cup until the final race of the year. And in fact, there's been a few US athletes in bobsleigh and skeleton who've come over to Europe, done a race or maybe 2, and then gone back to the US. And it's all about racing on different tracks in the years that lead you up to be able to qualify for the Olympic Games and for the World Cup. So our 3rd debutante in the World Championships. She was the 2nd out of the start shed. And again, you know, to go in the middle of the run, or, you know, a bit later when the shed's emptying out a little bit, maybe you've had longer to think about it, to worry about it. Maybe going off second is slightly better. I'm not sure being a rookie in Altenberg in your first ever Worlds is ever anything other than a bit of a tricky one for the brain. But let's see what she's got in the second heat. Ninth fastest starter, 5:61 in the first run.
.562 for her second run. Sarah had, I'm sure, what felt like a lifetime between her first and second heat here. She was early off in the first heat and now last off in the second. So she has been waiting and thinking. And the question is, how is she going to manage the stress of that here? Already looks to be a better run, much better than her first run.
Well, you're absolutely right. She will have been on ice at 9:06. It is now 11:30. That's 90 long minutes, of which 50-odd seconds were panic and crashing, and the rest was rueful thoughts. 23rd best speed. It's not going to help her catch Brogan Crowley, I don't think. But like Brogan, it's all about gaining experience on a very different stage. Of course, if we'd been in Lake Placid, she might have had an awful lot more to say about things. But a 60.36, that's quicker than her first heat as well. So she's tidied up a few of the errors that she needed to work on. But there is so much. There are 17 corners here and at least 17 possibilities to make a mistake. And the longer you've been here, the more of them you're aware of. But nothing wrong with the start, and the way she loads, ooh, a little stumble there, but very low heel return. The way she loads as well, rolls her shoulders down into the sled, gets them out of the air. That's exactly what you need.
And just tough timing there on these steers. When you learn these sports, Martin, through Lake Placid, where you don't have multi-pressure corners, it makes coming to a Kreisel like this so overwhelming. And she did a good job managing it. It is such just sensory overload trying to figure out where you are in that corner and timing your steers. And this was her first race, World Cup, World Championships in Altenberg, her first season here.
Well, after a crazy day of sliding for women's skeleton, Jacqueline Lölling of Germany moves from second place by 700ths after the first heat into the lead, where she is ahead of Elena Nikitina by 1100ths of a second. And teammate Tina Hermann is in third place, 2400ths back. Tina, after the first heat, was in 11th place, 6400ths back. So she has closed 4 tenths on the whole field, 6 tenths better than most. And in fact, Tina's second run down the track was 3 tenths quicker than anybody has been all day long. So we have a huge battle on our hands for the medals and lots of others sorting out to do tomorrow, I'm sure, in the heats 3 and 4 of the Women's World Championships. Overnight, Agathe Basar is 20th and in the race, and Dia Tarada, Alessia Crippa, Brogan Crowley and Sarah Roger will have to produce better runs to make it through into the 4th and final run for the top 20 only. For the moment, though, the women go away and think about it before they return for tomorrow to decide the medals. For Bree Schaff, from me, Martin Haven, and the IBSF TV crew, thanks for joining us. Stay with us today for more action from men's skeleton. Don't expect it to be any less crazy. Until then, stay safe. See you soon.
Fresh. Check. Yep.